Nordic native cattle, in memoriam Christer Kortebäck. Christer Kortebäck was working with native cattle in Sweden, and he was very enthusiastic in preserving native breeds and native cattle, and very friendly, sharing information about them and helping always where it was possible. He was also the chairman for the native cattle organization in Sweden for many years. And I dedicate this presentation to him. Have a look at some statistics about the Nordic native cattle. And Icelandic cattle is not included in these statistics as there are so many of them. Yeah, the graphics would not just work with them because there are so several thousands of them. And here you can see then all the rest of the native cattle in the Nordics. When Icelandic cattle have more than 20,000 milking cows, then the rest of the cattle have much more lower amount. And you can see that the Finn cattle here are among those we have more cattle from a little bit under 1,000 animals than yeah, the Western Finnish cattle is around 1,000, a little bit more than 1,000, whereas the Northern Finnish cattle is less than that. Otherwise, you can see that the Norwegian cattle, seeded Trønderfe and Nordlandsfe, has the highest amount. And if we look at those with the lowest amount, then it's Mælkekorthorn from Denmark. Many of the Danish native cattle are very small populations, and such is also the case for many of the Swedish native cattle. But they have several different populations. As Finland have only 3, then there are more Swedish populations, I think 5, and in Denmark there are also 4 different populations. And Norway have 6 different populations. So many of these organizations that are working with preserving these native cattle, they are really doing a hard work to try to keep up and try to increase the amount of the native cattle. All the statistics are not exactly from the same year, but they are picked a little bit from different resources. But most of them are from 2020s, so not older information here in the statistics. To Iceland was brought 4,000 years ago, and these have been a very good reference cattle for how native cattle used to look like in the Nordics during the Viking Age. Other cattle breeds have not been brought to Iceland because there is a prohibition to bring in domestic animals from abroad. So that is why it has been preserved that well, the Icelandic cattle breed. If we compare now the Finn cattle, we have only three breeds of Finn cattle in Finland. And we try to look at the pictures of the cattle here, then we could say that nearly 80% we have lost of the diversity that once our native cattle had. So here are also just some colored photos of the Icelandic cattle. And as already said, there are about 25,000 milking cows, and then with all the young cattle and the bulls on it, over it, so there is quite a lot of these cattle still left. Let's have then a look at Norsk storfe, so the native cattle in Norway, and the cattle is presented in alphabetic order. So not according to how many we have of them, but according to the names. And if we look then, we have here first Dölafe, which has about 500 Vestlandsk Raudkolle. It's a red cattle. There are least of them 357, whereas then Dölafe and Östländsk Rödkolle has more or less the same as also Telemarksfe, around 500. Then Vestlandsk Fjordfe, there are 1,300, and then the seeded Tröndefe and Norrlandsfe, there are more than 2,000 of. There is one organization that deals with issues of all of these native cattle in Norway. It's Norsk Bofe. Dölafe, this is one picture of this very typical photo or marks on how it looks, this Dölafe. But Dölafe can look in many different ways, so they are not just looking like this cattle here or this cow here. And this same type of outlook you have also among the Icelandic cattle. You find more photos from this presentation by clicking on the link or looking online. And after the name of each of these cattle breeds in this presentation, you find the name of the organization that is dealing with the breeding of these cattle. So Dölafe-laget is then working with this cattle breed. Seeded Tröndefe and Norrlandsfe, so seeded it means this side is one color, it's black, and the back of the cattle is white. And Avelslaget for seeded Tröndefe and Norrlandsfe is dealing with the conservation issues of this cattle. So Telemarksfe has this same pattern, but then in red. And it's Landslaget for Telemarksfe, which is working on the conservation of this cattle breed. Vestlandsk Fjordfe, it has this vogue beige color, or perhaps a little bit grayish, we could say also. And it's laget for Vestlands Fjordfe, who is taking care of the conservation of this breed. And this is how Vestlandsk Raudkolle looks like. And it's laget for Vestlandsk Raudkolle, who is taking care of the conservation issues. And here we have Östländsk Rödkolle, and it's laget for Östlands Rödkolle, who take care of the conservation issue. And all of these Norwegian breeds actually have had these old pedigrees and organizations and awareness of the native cattle already for more than 100 years. And some of them has been functioning like all the time, more or less. But Dölafe, for example, it was then here later, some 30 years ago, it was again focused on this breed, and the pedigree and conservation work started again. Native cattle in Sweden. In Sweden, there are bohuskulla, fjällko, and fjällnära ko, and ringmålarko, rödkulla, venekor, and then there are some that are extinct. If we look now at this, then ringmålarko has the smallest amount, but also bohuskulla, there are not so big differences between them. Venekor is nearly double of their amount, as also fjällnära ko. Fjällko is not as strict in their pedigree as fjällnära ko is. And fjällnära ko is also a little bit smaller than fjällko. And fjäll, it means tundra, it means mountain in the north. Those who are extinct, there are all types of cattle named Smålandsko. It's from south middle of Sweden, and Gotlandsko. It was a yellowish cattle from Gotland Island, and then there was also this Hjälmadko, which is like one colored body and white head of the cattle. So those types are not anymore. Vereningen Almugekon were taking of 3 of these cattle. First we have here Bohuskulla, and you can see how diverse it is in its outlooks. And then we have this Fjällko that is a little bit bigger than Fjällnära ko, and you can find this Fjällko then in also a normal agricultural, industrial agricultural herds. It fits well in there. And here a photo of fjällnära cattle. You can see that it's a little bit smaller, very well climbing here. And it's a Svensk fjällrasavel who takes care of these fjäll and fjällnära cattle and their breeding. We have ringmålarko, which there were very few of left. Rödkulla is then that cattle that has the most of animals, around 1,600, and that's an old breed from starting the pedigree in 1912. And it's Sveriges Rödkulleförening Association who takes care of its conservation. And then we have the last Swedish one, Veneko. There are 3 types of native cattle in Finland: the Eastern Finn cattle, Western Finn cattle, and Northern Finn cattle. And then there are some types that we don't have anymore that are extinct. For example, there was a yellow cow on the islands, a grey cow. In last records of it was from Eastern Finland, and then a white-headed cow. And if we look at the amount, then Northern Finn cattle have the least, and most there are of Eastern Finn cattle. Western Finn cattle had for many years the highest amount of animals, but it has been drastically now reducing. Eastern Finn cattle. For many years we had an NGO, Suomen Alkuperäiskarja ry, which worked with native cattle in Finland. This one has stopped now, and today there is a new organization named Suomen Karja ry. And Western Finn cattle looks a lot like Rödkulla in Sweden, or also like native cattle in Estonia. And then the Northern Finn cattle, the most diverse in colors and marks of the Finnish native cattle. All the Finnish native cattle pedigree organizations were established in the beginning of the 20th century. Native cattle in Denmark. There are 5 native cattle in Denmark. Æsøkvæg, also called økvæg. Dansk oldmælkeko is the red Danish milking cattle. Jysk kvæg, Jutlandia cattle. Mælkekorthorn, the Danish dairy shorthorn cattle. Sortquote dansk mælkerace, the Danish black and white cattle. Most we have of the Jutlandia cattle, 700. And then on the second place, there is the red Danish milking cattle with 260. And then it goes down. The island cattle, Easökve, 160. And then short-throat Danish Melkerase, the Danish black and white cattle with 83. And the least of them, there is Danish dairy shorthorn cattle. Let's have a look on how they look. This is Æsøkvæg, or could also be called Økvæg, so the island cattle. And Dansk Husdyr is working with preservation of these cattle, but there are also others. For example, Oregard is also working with this. Danish milking cattle is very similar to the red cattle in Norway and in Sweden, and resembles also the Western Finn cattle or Estonian native cattle. And they have an own organization, All Dansk Melkeku organization, who takes care of their conservation work. Jyske Kvæg, Jutland cattle, was very well known already in the 19th century. So it's a black and white colored, but you can see that there are, from the photo, that there are also different nuances of this. So not all are very dark black and white, but there are also some grayish black colors. And their origin are in 4 different lines. Then there is the Danish dairy shorthorn cattle, which has a connection to England, and but is considered then being an old native breed in Denmark as well. And there is the lowest amount of this type of cattle left. And they have an own breeding organization, Dansk Korthorn. The Danish black and white cattle, a milking cow, and there are also very few left of these, less than 100.